The afternoon sun beat down on Fort Lewis, Washington, baking the asphalt of the motor pool. It was the kind of heat that made the grease in your hands sticky, but Sergeant Amelia Ace Cole barely noticed. Her focus was sharp, her hazel eyes constantly scanning. Amelia was, by any measure, a brilliant mechanic. She was strong, built tough from years of turning wrenches and hauling iron, and she knew the heart of a tank better than most knew their own living room. But Amelia was also female, and in the old-school, grease-stained world of the base motor pool, that meant she was a target. Her current assignment was a punishment detail, preparing a relic M4 Sherman tank for a static museum display. It was a beautiful, simple machine from a different time, scarred with history. It stood next to the massive, complex M1 Abrams tanks, which represented the modern fleet and Amelia's actual job. Well, look at Daisy. A loud, sneering voice cut through the heavy air. It was Master Sergeant Dale Henson, her immediate supervisor. Henson was a big man, slow-moving, with a permanent scowl that seemed fueled by chewing tobacco and deep-seated arrogance. He always called her Daisy, a dismissive, floral nickname that mocked her competence. "Still polishing that antique, Sergeant Cole?" Henson asked, his voice dripping with condescension. He didn't wait for a reply, turning to the two male mechanics next to him, who snickered dutifully. "She thinks that little box of bolts can teach the M1 anything. It's a museum piece, not an actual combat vehicle, just like some of the people working on it." Amelia wiped the sweat from her brow, keeping her expression neutral. Inside, a familiar hot burn of injustice tightened her chest. It was always like this. She'd put in 30 hours diagnosing a faulty turbine bearing on an Abrams, presenting her findings in a clear 7-page report. Henson had tossed it in the trash without reading past the first paragraph, claiming she was overthinking simple maintenance. "It's about simplicity and rugged design, Master Sergeant," Amelia said. Her voice steady and respectful, though her jaw was clenched. The Sherman's design philosophy was, keep it running no matter what. That's a lesson we seem to be forgetting on the M1 fleet. Henson laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Simplicity? That thing was a death trap." The Krauts mocked it. "The only thing simple about it was the crew dying inside it." He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the ground near the Sherman's tread. "You stick to dusting relics, Daisy. Leave the high-tech work to the men who understand it." He walked away, leaving Amelia alone with the old tank and the insult. She didn't let the anger stop her. She reached into the Sherman's engine bay. The engine was completely seized, a rusted paperweight. But Amelia wasn't just preparing it for display. She was slowly, meticulously, bringing it back to life in secret. The old M4 was her refuge, a testament to pure, honest engineering, and a quiet promise to herself that she would prove reliability was about skill, not just complexity. She laid a hand on the cool steel of the hull. She was insulted, mocked, and underestimated, but they hadn't broken her spirit yet. Not by a long shot. The following week, the problem Amelia had warned about escalated into a full-blown crisis. The 3rd Platoon was preparing for the annual Thunder Run readiness exercise, a high-stakes event involving a rapid deployment of the M1 Abrams tanks. And the tanks were breaking down. Not with complex, hard-to-find failures, but with the same recurring, frustrating issue, a complete loss of power due to what appeared to be a simple, constant failure of the main fuel filter assembly. Amelia had pinpointed this in her rejected report. She'd tracked the failure rate, the specific part batch numbers, and even suggested a modification to the mounting bracket to reduce vibration stress. It was a simple, old-school mechanical problem. She watched as a highly paid civilian contractor was called in. The contractor, a friend of Henson's, spent 2 days doing a complex electronic analysis, replacing $1,000 worth of sensors, and declaring the problem user error. The tank broke down again within an hour. Henson stood over Amelia as she was polishing the brass plaque on the Sherman. "See, Daisy? This is real-world problem-solving. This isn't just about turning a crank on your little toy," he sneered, oblivious to the failure of the expensive fix. "Master Sergeant," Amelia insisted, holding a clean rag, "it's the fuel line bracket. The new supplier used a cheaper aluminum alloy. It's failing under harmonic vibration. A simple steel reinforcement plate would fix every tank on this base. Henson's face turned an ugly red. Are you calling me a liar, Sergeant? Are you saying my procurement choice was flawed? Amelia didn't back down. I'm saying the data is clear, sir. The failure point is mechanical stress, not electronic failure. It's costing the base thousands in wasted parts and delaying a critical exercise. That is enough, Henson roared, slamming his hand down on the hood of a nearby Humvee. You are relieved of all diagnostic duties immediately. You will continue to polish that relic until I tell you otherwise. If I see you touching an M1 wrench, you'll be writing reports in Siberia. The injustice was a physical blow. She wasn't just dismissed. She was gagged. Her skills were being deliberately suppressed, not because she was wrong, but because her solution was simple and exposed a fundamental mistake, perhaps even a corner cut by Henson himself. The sheer waste, the danger it posed to the crews during the exercise, fueled her quiet resolve. She returned to the old Sherman, her hands aching for real work, and began the slow, painful process of removing the deeply corroded oil pump. This tank, this relic of a bygone era, was her only way forward. If they wouldn't let her save the modern fleet with her brain, she would show them the true meaning of reliability with her hands. Amelia's work on the Sherman became her silent protest and her therapy. While the motor pool buzzed with frustrated mechanics throwing expensive, high-tech parts at the M1 Abrams fleet with no success, Amelia was deep in the straightforward, rugged engineering of the M4. She had to invent tools, scour online forums for old manuals, and even drive to a scrapyard 30 miles away on her own time to find a simple copper washer from a 1940s engine that was just the right thickness. The work was dirty and relentless. She spent her evenings covered in grime, skipping social events and ignoring the sympathetic but useless glances from her peers. The emotional beat of this time was the connection she felt to the Sherman's history. As she worked, she imagined the young mechanics in North Africa or Europe, facing the same challenges with limited resources, relying on simple, standardized parts and sheer ingenuity to keep their machines running. The Sherman wasn't complex, but it was tough. It could take a beating, and with a little elbow grease and common sense, it always came back to life. One evening, exhausted but satisfied, she managed to free the engine's flywheel. She stood back, looking at the massive steel unit, simple, heavy, and built to last. It was the absolute opposite of the fragile, over-engineered components failing on the M1s. She had a breakthrough thought. The original problem she'd identified, the aluminum fuel bracket, was just the surface. The deeper issue, the core flaw Henson was covering up, wasn't just a simple design mistake. It was a philosophical error in procurement, sacrificing basic, rugged material strength for marginal weight savings and cheaper materials, and then covering it up with expensive, complex electronic troubleshooting. They were ignoring the wisdom of the past, the hard-won lesson that in battle, simplicity equals survival. The true solution was to expose this philosophy of failure. Amelia knew that proving her diagnostic skills on the M1 was now impossible. Henson had locked her out, but she could do something more powerful. She could make the old M4 Sherman run. She could use a 70-year-old tank to be the ultimate proof of reliability, a stark, loud contrast to the broken modern fleet. The idea was audacious, maybe career-ending, but it was the only way to seek justice, not just for herself, but for the principle of sound, honest engineering she believed in. Her hands, covered in old oil, tightened on a wrench. The Sherman would run, and everyone would hear it. The Thunder Run exercise was just 3 days away. Tension was high. The M1 Abrams tanks were still failing, despite frantic, expensive work. Henson was a wreck, shouting at his team and threatening disciplinary action. He knew his career hinged on the success of the exercise, and Amelia knew he was terrified of anyone finding out that his cheap procurement had been the root cause of the crippling failures. Amelia moved with the quiet stealth of someone with nothing left to lose. She was officially confined to the relic, but she used her time to systematically gather the concrete evidence of Henson's negligence. Her sacrifice was total. She stayed awake for 72 hours straight, fueled by bad coffee and pure indignation. Under the cloak of night, she used her access codes to pull up the initial parts requisition documents for the failing fuel brackets. There it was, in black and white, Henson, overriding the standard military-grade specification to approve a cheaper, commercial-grade alloy from a vendor tied to a previous posting of his. It was clear-cut corruption. She downloaded the documents onto an old, secure external drive she kept hidden in the toolbox of the Sherman. Meanwhile, she was working miracles on the M4. The engine was finally free. She had jury-rigged a modern battery to the old electrical system, found spark plugs that worked, and, the final, delicate touch, rebuilt the aging carburetor using parts from a discarded lawnmower engine and some ingenuity. She had a massive, historic V8 engine humming with quiet power. The contrast was staggering. Just 50 feet away, a team of 3 men and a contractor were screaming at a multi-million-dollar Abrams that refused to start, defeated by a tiny, cheap piece of metal. But Amelia's 70-year-old, simple box of bolts, as Henson called it, was alive. Her moment of true strength came when she was confronted by one of the younger mechanics, Private First Class Jenkins. He'd been one of the snickering onlookers in Part 1. He found her under the Sherman, covered in grime, welding a crucial exhaust patch. "Sergeant Cole," Jenkins stammered, looking at the smooth, quiet engine she'd somehow resurrected. "I don't get it. We've replaced half the computer on the 4-1 Delta, and it's still dead. How is this thing running?" Amelia looked up, her face streaked with oil but her eyes burning bright. "Because, Private," she said, her voice low and firm, "reliability isn't about complexity. It's about honesty and engineering. You build it right the first time with no shortcuts, and it will always get you home." Jenkins nodded slowly. The respect was finally there, earned not with words, but with proof. Amelia now had her evidence, and she had her working weapon, the reliable M4 Sherman. She knew the consequences of her plan could be severe, but seeing the fear in Henson's eyes and the dangerous state of the M1 fleet, she knew she had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. The time for quiet work was over. The time for the demonstration was about to begin. The morning of the Thunder Run was a disaster in the making. General Harrison, a stickler for readiness and efficiency, was present with a dozen high-ranking observers. The horn sounded for the deployment, and the first M1 Abrams tank sputtered, stalled, and died on the starting line. Then the second. Then a third, suffering the exact same fuel assembly failure Amelia had identified weeks ago. Henson went ballistic, desperately trying to blame the drivers, the fuel, the weather, anything but his own flawed procurement. The general's face hardened into stone. The Thunder Run was a humiliating bust. As Henson was frantically shouting orders, Amelia took her chance. She climbed into the driver's seat of the old M4 Sherman, securing her simple, plain helmet. The engine, running perfectly thanks to her tireless work, fired up with a deep, throaty roar, a sound that echoed with the history of its service. Ignoring the shouted commands of a junior officer, Amelia shifted the heavy gears and drove the Sherman, slowly and deliberately, onto the middle of the field. The heavy, historic tank drove past the crippled, silent, modern fleet. She stopped the Sherman right in front of the reviewing stand where General Harrison and Henson stood. She cut the engine. In the sudden, awkward silence of the failed exercise, the reliable M4 was the only thing that had worked. Amelia dismounted, standing tall and utterly composed. Her uniform was clean, her posture impeccable, even though her hands were stained with grease. She didn't salute, but stood at attention holding her secure drive in her hand. "Sergeant Cole, what the hell is the meaning of this insubordination?" Henson roared, stepping toward her, his face purple with rage and panic. Amelia looked past him, locking eyes with General Harrison. "General, with all respect, this is the meaning of reliability," she said, tapping the old tank's hull. "This M4, built with rugged, simple principles, is fully operational. It starts, it runs, and it will keep going." Then she looked directly at Henson. "The modern fleet is failing not because of complex electronics, but because of a corrupt, simple choice to sacrifice essential material strength for profit. The main fuel bracket on every tank is failing under stress due to non-spec aluminum chosen by Master Sergeant Henson. She stepped forward and handed the drive to a stunned General Harrison. All the diagnostic data, the procurement order, and the original material specifications are on this drive, sir. The problem isn't the tank's complexity. It's the lack of integrity in its maintenance and supply chain. The entire field went silent. Henson looked like a trapped animal trying to stutter a denial, but the sight of the perfectly running Sherman next to the three silent modern hulks was an undeniable, powerful piece of evidence. The look in Amelia's eyes, the quiet, burning strength of her conviction, told the general everything he needed to know. The truth finally had been exposed. The aftermath was swift. General Harrison, a man of integrity, immediately ordered a full investigation. The evidence Amelia provided was irrefutable. Master Sergeant Henson was relieved of duty and faced a court-martial for corruption and negligence. The cheap fuel brackets were recalled, and Amelia's simple, effective steel reinforcement plate was approved as the permanent fix for the entire fleet. Amelia, initially bracing for a reprimand for her insubordination, found herself the quiet hero. She wasn't just cleared. She was promoted to staff sergeant and given full control of the motor pool's diagnostic and maintenance protocols. Her strength, her sacrifice, and her journey had finally led to justice. But the true, satisfying twist happened a month later. Amelia's detailed, written analysis that she had originally prepared for the general, the one that explained why the Sherman's simple, rugged engineering was superior in philosophy to the modern, flawed approach, was accidentally included in a public affairs report about the maintenance overhaul. An ambitious military affairs journalist saw the contrast and realized the deeper story. He paired Amelia's philosophical essay with archival footage of a famous captured Sherman tank being analyzed by German engineers in 1944. The engineers, highly impressed with its simple, easy-to-repair design and reliable components compared to their own complex, failure-prone designs, had been secretly stunned by the enemy's engineering philosophy. The journalist used the old historical footage to frame Amelia's modern victory. The resulting documentary went viral. It was a story not just about the Sherman, but about the timeless importance of honesty and simplicity in engineering, and the brave soldier who championed it. Amelia was watching the internet on her phone, taking a rare, quiet moment of rest next to her now-famous M4. The documentary was trending at #1. The screen of her phone showed the title of the video, a title that perfectly summarized her long fight, her victory, and the enduring lesson she had taught the base. Captured Sherman stunned German engineers. They'd never seen reliability like this. The irony was perfect. The old tank, once her punishment and her scorned hobby, had become the symbol of her own reliability, her own integrity, and the ultimate exposure of the truth. She earned not just respect, but a quiet, powerful vindication that reached across decades. She smiled, a rare, genuine smile, as she laid her hand once more on the cool steel of the old M4. The little box of bolts had won the war.